One of the most common problems I hear from beginner Korean learners, no matter how long they've been at it, is that spoken Korean just sounds like a garbled mess whenever they try to listen to it. I've worked with probably over 1,000 language learners at this point, learning English and Korean, and basically everyone has had this problem at some point, myself included. Now, some people might say that it's difficult because you're trying to, learn a new sound system and you're trying to figure out how all those different little sounds go together into comprehensible bits of information, but the truth is, it's because you're a dummy. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But anyway, I don't think this happens because we haven't learned enough. I think it actually happens because we've learned too much. If the glass is full, it can't hold no more water. Stay with me now. In this video, I'm gonna share the 3 skills you need in order to fix this problem and ditch the training wheels. Speaking of which, you guys wanna ride bikes? I haven't owned a bike for like 10 years, so just for this video, I gaslit someone on Hangul, which is like the Korean version of Facebook Marketplace, until they sold me this absolute beauty of a women's bike for 10 bucks. If I asked you to tell me the story of how you learned how to ride a bike, you'd probably tell me that you got a little bike when you were young, and your parents, somebody slapped some training wheels on the back of it, and that's how you learned how to ride. But the interesting thing is that is actually a terrible way to learn how to ride a bike. Because training wheels, they may let you operate a bike, kind of, and they may make you feel like you're riding a bike because you look like you're riding a bike, but because they don't teach you any of the skills you need in order to ride a bike, the second you take them off, you're gonna wipe out. A German guy named Rolf Mertens figured out that kids could learn to ride bikes much, much faster, 45% faster according to some studies I've seen, not by adding training wheels, but by removing the pedals. Our buddy Rolf wasn't actually the first person to come up with this technology. It was actually invented like 170 years ago, but for whatever reason it fell out of use. It's almost like a big training wheel doesn't want us to know the truth. So anyway, these balance bikes or running bikes are actually really interesting and helpful because they force riders to learn the one thing that they need to know in order to actually ride a bike, which is how to balance the bike. You know, most people start learning Korean by starting with Hangul first, the writing system, which is a way to essentially slap on training wheels to the process of learning Korean. It's essentially using your existing skills as a literate person to start building a web of words and use your existing knowledge to feel like you're, speaking Korean because you're able to kind of solve mathematical equations of Korean by learning some of the rules. And I, admittedly, way too flippantly, also recommended to start with doing this, but I don't think I would give that advice today, even though it's probably what most people want to hear. The thing is, though, when you take this approach to learning Korean, what's going to happen when you listen to native speakers is you're not going to be able to pick apart anything they're saying. So just like actually riding a bike starts with learning how to, understand what all the little physics feel like, understanding spoken language starts with being able to perceive all of its sounds. So like you may know in your mind that Korean has different sounds like ah and o and all and and you may know that because you've gone through the process of learning what all of those different sounds are by using a tool like the International Phonetic Alphabet or your own language's writing system or something like that. But if you haven't gone through the process of learning how those sounds feel and how those sounds are different from one another and how those sounds work in relationship to one another, you're never going to be able to pick them apart when actually listening to spoken Korean. I'm in the middle of a river right now, or a stream. Let me show you what I'm talking about by using a really good example that was created by a guy who used to make YouTube videos who was, for some reason, in conflict with Japan. And he wasn't even a Korean learner. Listen to the following 2 sentences and try to repeat the sounds you're hearing back just like a parrot.
구북마 어깨수마다에
Glubtubus weppel. Let me guess how that went for you. I bet that you could repeat the second one back, no problem. But the first one was like a total mess for you, right? If that was the case, it's because your brain has all of the ability and all of the skills to detect and parse the sounds of the English language, which is what I used for the example you could understand, but it doesn't have all the skills to do that for the Korean example, which you couldn't understand. So perception is skill number 1, but we also need to work on skill number 2, intuition. So if perception is recognizing all of the little sounds that you're going to run into when you're learning the language, intuition is learning how all of those sounds interact, well, how they behave. So let's take another look at bikes here, just to give an example. As it turns out, riding a bike is not actually a very straightforward process. You may think that you can map the different mechanical parts of the bike and their functions to your intentions, but that's not really the case. Like, oh yeah, we use the pedals to go forward, we use the brakes to stop, we turn the handlebars left and right in order to steer. But to make a right turn, for example, you can't just turn the wheel to the right like a car. If you do that, the rest of the bike will want to keep going forward, and you're going to learn about physics the hard way. So since the ability to ride a bike hinges on this intuitive understanding of the complex physics of the bike, we all know that we have to actually start steering left a little bit, which then causes the bike to lean right. And if we lean into that right turn along with moving the handlebars in the right direction, we can actually make the turn. The thing is, most everybody who knows how to ride a bike probably has absolutely no idea that that's how they turn right. They just know how to do it. So when they feel the forces and they start riding the bike, they just do it. Nike, please sponsor me. I love your products. Okay, so let's look at this in a language context. Like, we've got words and we've got sounds, but sounds have their own behavior that they take on inside of words, right? Like, sounds don't just do one thing all of the time. Like, let's talk about English, for example. We've got tons of sounds that don't ever show up in writing the way that they actually sound. I got you is always I got you. And would you like to is very often like "d'ya like to" or "would you like to." So like, sure, these patterns can be classified and identified with like rules and stuff like that, but we aren't consciously thinking about these rules. Like, the system of how these sounds work is something that speakers of the language just intuitively know. And that intuition comes from just experiencing them over and over again until we just do it. Well, at least until our brains just fill in the gaps automatically so we can do it. And I think this is probably one of the biggest communication failures of immersion-based learning. And this is why so many immersion-based learning teachers tell you to start immersing before you can understand, and even though that's something that a ton of people get really frustrated with, because you have to learn to intuit this part of speech if you ever want to actually sound like someone who speaks the language, or understand people who speak the language when they make those sounds, because this is something that you're never going to be able to learn from writing, analyzing language in that way, etc., etc., etc. Haircut. Also, ad break. Today's sponsor is my favorite Korean learning tool, Kimchi Reader. Whether it's subtitles on YouTube, Netflix, or Viki, entire web pages, news articles, and more, Kimchi Reader gives you convenient access to dictionary definitions, grammar explanations, and pronunciation help, all right there on the page. But Ian, you say, isn't this entire video you telling us to stop using subtitles? No, I say. This video is about you needing to listen better, you ding dong. I'm not telling you to not look up words that you are reading, which Kimchi Reader can help you with. I am not saying you should not read subtitles when you are enjoying content, which Kimchi Reader makes much, much easier. What I am saying in this video, which you should be listening to, is that if you want to be better at listening to Korean, you need to listen to Korean. So, if you are looking for the ultimate tool to start making immersion content work for you, go to kimchi-reader.app. That's kimchi-reader.app. You can also find the link in the description, and use the discount code PATCH for an additional 10% off of your subscription. Make sure you say hi and thank you to Maxime, the developer of Kimchi Reader, for partnering with Korean Patch and for making something so awesome for our community. As you can tell, I saw a pretty stream and walked away from my bike into the into the forest here. Oops.
Approximately 10 hours later.
So this brings us to the third and final skill, which is letting go. What I've noticed is that when people say they're struggling with listening, what they're actually trying to do is process every single word in real time. And the funny thing is, that's not how fluent speakers of any language, native speakers or anybody, operate. Most of the time, your brain doesn't even give you the experience of processing every single word in your native language either. You just get the gist and you move on. This is an interesting thing called top-down processing, and we don't have to get into the details of how it works right now. Basically, this is a way to explain how sometimes you hear a sentence and understand it, but you're not able to repeat any individual part of the sentence back after hearing it. When you're riding a bike downhill, you don't actively calculate all the little adjustments you need to make. You just do it. And this skill works in language the exact same way. When you stop trying to process everything and you just let your brain piece together all the stuff that it needs to, it works. So here's a big takeaway. If Korean still sounds like a mess to you, it's not because you haven't studied enough. It's because you haven't had your balanced bike phase. It's because you haven't spent enough time on the little skills that make you better at learning Korean, you know? Not better at Korean itself, but better at learning Korean, better at acquiring Korean. So instead of relying on training wheels, instead of relying on your knowledge and things you've learned, focus on your perception, focus on your intuition, and trust yourself. Enjoy the process. Be present. I know that sounds like some woo-woo nonsense, but I'm serious. As someone who's done this before, as someone who, I guess, more or less is on the other side of the learning process, you want to do this or not, you know? So, you ready to take off the training wheels? If so, let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, whatever. You know what to do. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.